Hello, folks. I'm Nick Bernardo, your host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the U.S., good afternoon. Good morning to those out west. And hello to anyone joining us from the far corners of the earth or watching online in the future. Today is Wednesday, November 15th, 2023, and this series is brought to you by MyGovWatch. MyGovWatch is revolutionizing traditional bid notification and matching by providing RFP leads in more than 200 industries using AI best practices at double the rate of free government tools and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. Big government contracts don't start with a solicitation, but all roads lead to one. And your budget for hearing about RFPs does not have to be thousands of dollars per year. Start your 14-day free trial today. So folks, obviously, you can see the background here. We're doing a little bit of a Thanksgiving theme. We have the holidays quickly coming upon us, particularly Thanksgiving next week. And I will just start by saying that I appreciate you all joining me. Typically, I have a co-host on these sessions, but I had someone cancel, and I just decided to take it on my own. And we do have a full schedule for the next 90 minutes. Certainly, we'll be able to get to everyone who has questions. I don't think that will be an issue at all. And what I'm going to do is something a little bit different this time. Anyone who joins, I'm going to keep you on video and audio unless you decide to opt out of that. So if you want to be part of the conversation on an ongoing basis for the next hour or so, then I welcome that. Also, I'm going to be asking you when you join us, I'll ask you a little bit about your business. I always do that. But I'm also going to be asking you, now that we have Thanksgiving around the corner, do you have a Thanksgiving anecdote or memory you'd like to share? Do you have a Thanksgiving joke that you would like to share? Or would you like to hear a joke? I might even have a list of dad jokes in front of me. Or finally, is there something that you're thankful for that you would just like to share? So we try to keep this format very casual and just a little bit more fun. The content is not always something that will keep you up at night. Sometimes it can be a little bit dry. So we try to cut through that by making it a little bit more fun. So we have a lot of people with us here. Clay, I know we're going to be talking to you momentarily. Let me just see who else we have who promised to be on here with us, and let's see if they're on here. Clay, we're probably going to be coming to you almost right away. Dave Buckley, if I see you're with us as well, you and Clay may have some things that you can talk about at the same time. And we have someone on with us, Nathan Kaplan. And Nathan, we're going to come to you probably later in the first half hour or 45 minutes. And Nathan is actually a doctoral candidate, I believe, with Harvard University, and he wants to talk about some things related to public purchasing in the banking and finance industry. So, Clay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you on. And I see three different Dave Buckleys on with us. If there is one person using that account who would like to participate, can you please raise your hand? Because there's reasons why I would like to bring you on at the same time as Clay. You all are in the same industry. So if you'd like to join this session, I see that you've raised your hand, so I'm going to bring you in as well. Okay, Clay, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to MyGovWatch Live. Although I know who you are, can you share for the audience who are you and what do you do and where are you joining us from?
Hi, everybody. My name is Clay Perry. I'm a Director of Client Services and Solutions with Broad Range Logistics. I live just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and North Mississippi. So looking forward to the discussion today and learning more. And I'm with Broad Range Logistics. Like I said, we're a 3PL that specializes and really markets ourselves as being the most flexible 3PL in the industry. A lot of times, typically 3PLs will have, or anybody in logistics will have, contracts that you have to stick to 3 years, 5 years, whatever. We try to be real flexible, understanding that the industry is a very, very fluid industry, and sometimes 3-year contract is way too much. You may need a couple of months or 6 months or a year or whatever. So try to be very flexible, really helpful in the project areas. Somebody has a project they need help with, need storage, overflow storage, things like that. That's where we come in and really provide a value. So that's kind of the additional look at this as trying to see how working with the government and RFPs, how we can respond to that. And maybe, like I said, in a warehousing capacity, storage capacity, project capacity, things like that. So,
yeah. So welcome, Clay and David. Could you give us your audio? And some of you may not know all of the acronyms. So Clay is in the logistics business, so trucking, warehousing, that kind of support. And David, are you able to share your audio?
Yes, I can.
All right. So David, you may see some good reasons that the same as I did about why I would bring you on at the same time as Clay. So where are you joining us from, and what does your company do?
We are from Omaha, Nebraska. We're also a 3PL, but we do have our own assets, 33 of them to be exact. And we do a lot of work. We're recognized at Ho-Chunk as a government agency. So we're doing a lot of business with the DoD. We just want to expand into the government realm, and it's all about the bottom line. So hopefully this will help us out.
Well, I'm going to ask you each this question before we get into the content. Do you have a Thanksgiving anecdote, memory, joke, or something that you're thankful for?
I'm thankful I didn't burn my house down when I was frying my first turkey.
Well, having fried a turkey myself, I get that completely, but I definitely watched a lot of YouTube videos first and did it outside.
Yes, it's a learning process by all means. Do not overfill your container.
Yes, and don't put a cold one in there for sure.
No, absolutely not.
And Clay, do you have an anecdote, memory, a joke? Would you like to hear a joke or something you're thankful for?
I have no jokes. Some of my best memories though. I'm a Cowboys fan, so having that as a standard part of my Thanksgiving every year since I was a small kid, that's my best memory. And then of course I've always been in charge of smoking the turkey. Myself and my dad's always been in charge of smoking it. So having smoked turkey, having all those staples, cornbread dressing, not stuffing, but cornbread dressing. Big difference there, along with my smoked turkey and then some football. That's some of the best memories with current family members and ones that have since passed, grandparents, things like that. So it's always been a good memory that's been there for me.
It's a beautiful.
Hey, Clay,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Clay, can you see the view box? Did you see the guy that's shown there that says Dave Buckley?
Yes.
That is actually my boss, Joe, and he's a diehard Cowgirls fan.
That's enough of that.
We give him all the time. So you're in good company here.
Perfect.
Well, you're not in great company because I'm in Eagles land, and I know neither one of y'all care about the Philadelphia Eagles. No one likes us, and we don't care, as they say. So,
don't y'all hate Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Try being a Husker fan. Nobody likes us.
Well, thanks for joining, and obviously you all can see the reason why I brought you on at the same time. So, Clay, just because you seem to be a little bit more novice, what specific question would you like to start with?
We do mainly in the private sector, but wanting to learn more about working with the government. So one of the questions I sent you yesterday was, how can Broad Range participate in more RFPs, especially around warehousing, storage, some logistics, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, great question. There's an old joke I like to tell. There was a guy who laid in bed every night asking God, please let me win the lottery. Please let me win the lottery. And after months and months of hearing the prayers, God says down to the person, why don't you buy a ticket? And I say that joke when we get questions like that, because one easy way to win the lottery, or easier, is buy more tickets. And in terms of RFPs, it is simply responding to more opportunities that seem like they're in your wheelhouse. And that is one of the choke points of this market, Clay, and you and your colleagues should know this, is the throughput. There's a throughput issue, and this is really logistics, but it's logistics related to RFPs. That is, you only have so many hours in a day to devote to responding to RFPs. So let me ask you a question. Do you have someone who is responding to private sector RFPs who writes them on behalf of your company?
Yeah, it's myself.
Okay. All right. And is that your only responsibility?
Definitely not. No, I've got building my team up as it is.
Yeah. Okay. So as you talk about this with your colleagues, at a fundamental level, they need to understand that it's a function of how many bids can someone respond to in a month. If they have other responsibilities, and far be it from me to say whether your company should have a dedicated proposal resource, but there is a point in time where every organization needs to decide, is this something that needs to be a full-time job for someone, or is this a shared thing that everyone works on together? But that is definitely one of the choke points, is making sure that you respond to more RFPs this year than you may have last year. And certainly there's a lot in government. And this is a question for both of you guys. Have you noticed that people throw the term logistics around very loosely?
Very, very loosely. Yeah.
Very much.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. I would like you all to answer this for the audience. When people misuse the term logistics or mean 17 different things, how does that make it harder for you to know how to spend your marketing time?
One thing I've noticed is a lot of people you say that you're a logistics company when I'm calling on them. And a lot of people have had bad experiences with logistics companies. So a lot of times you get a negative response right away when they figure out that you're a 3PL.
And why do they get a negative response?
Just they've had either bad service or bad situations, or, when these things started popping out of the woodwork back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all of us in the LTL industry kind of thought they would just be a flash in the pan and they'd come and then they'd go. But obviously we have stuck around, and we actually thrive, doing what we do, and we're trying to bring some integrity back to the game. And I think Clay's probably in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
Clay, do you feel sometimes there's a little animosity when you bring up the word logistics?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think a couple things that come to mind is that I think logistics comes to mind with people think of it only as transportation, right? Just the physical move, getting from A to B. There's so much more that goes on behind the scenes, and so many things you can do with that. That's where I try to come in and try to. I think David and I both would probably tell you that we try to give more than just a transportation move. We try to provide true value to help with whatever the client's needs. We try to meet the client's needs and try to provide a different angle on a solution that maybe they haven't gotten before. Or it's very, very in our like I said, we're very flexible at broad range, so we try not to. We'll find a way. I'm gonna try to find a way to tell you yes and sell them, instead of saying no. You got to fit into our window. I'm trying to fit into yours and try to be more flexible.
Yeah. And I don't use the term. We have a lot of lateral movement to make it pertain to what that customer needs from us.
Yeah, and back to the original question about like how to get involved in more opportunities. So certainly if you're on MyGovWatch, and I think both of you, at least Clay, I know you're in a trial. David, I think I'm not sure if you're beyond that, but there certainly are lots of opportunities where it's obvious that they're buying, they want warehouse space, or they want people to move things around the country, whether it be, trucking services in general or less than truckload. So you're certainly going to see those on the site. Have you all noticed that there's a disproportionate number of federal opportunities that are talking about logistics?
I personally haven't got that far into it yet. One of my next questions is wanting to see where the best opportunities are. Is it more of a federal, state, local level? Where are the best? Where do you find the most bang for your buck, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to best, and I know that's an important question, but I would encourage you all to take a look at federal contracting with a very broad view of what could possibly be of interest to you, and here's why. Federally, I believe that dollar for dollar, they are probably buying more around what you guys do than state and local. And we just see these titles all the time involving logistics, and you really have to investigate, what do they mean by logistics in the scope of work? And sometimes they may mean exactly what you hope they mean. In other cases, you may see that, well, they're calling it logistics, but it's not really what you do. So I would encourage you all to be taking a very broad look at federal opportunities and identifying when are these opportunities in your wheelhouse? If maybe if it's something issued by the Defense Logistics Agency, that might mean that it's more likely to be in your wheelhouse. And you may find over time that other buyers, when they use the term logistics, they don't really mean what you want them to mean. I would encourage you all to learn a little bit more about mentoring. At the federal level, there's a mentor protege program for smaller companies. There are also teaming opportunities with federal contracts in which multiple parties can submit offers on federal contracting opportunities as team members. So let me ask you this question, folks. How often is it that you're providing a solution in the private sector where you need to partner with someone to do that, whether it be a company that doesn't do what you do and you do what they don't do and vice versa?
My current role, we don't do that. In previous roles as other 3PLs, larger companies, we've had to do that.
Yeah, so I suspect that there are a lot of federal opportunities where a company that is an administration company, and there are companies that do administrative work, and it's under the larger umbrella of logistics, they may not have the infrastructure that you have, and you may either be a teaming partner on a federal bid to them or with them, or they may be a prime contractor if they're maybe very established in federal contracting, and you may be a significant subcontractor for them. So I would encourage you to look at federal opportunities where you have opportunities to partner with others. And Clay, in terms of the best opportunities, boy, that's a tough one. David, maybe I'll get you involved in this. I think when people think about what is the best opportunity in government contracting, there's nothing I can do other than put it back on you and say, well, what does your current client mix look like, and which clients are the best among that mix? So, David, do you have thoughts around, which kinds of government opportunities have been more beneficial to your company?
Send them all. We'll bid on every doggone one of them.
Well, let me hear. I can speak to this a little better. Currently, I mean, that is pretty much predominantly our business is government contracting. We are around 290 to probably 300 million a year in federal contracting. We supply many facilities with the furniture that they have. We bid on just administrative work. You pretty much can throw it at on the wall, then we can probably say that we've done something in that that area. I mean, we currently are supplying all the furniture in Puerto Rico to all the IRS facilities in Puerto Rico. I mean, so we have a lot of federal, I don't say jurisdiction, but I mean, we have a lot of abilities that we can do there. What we're looking for is basically the freight, the warehousing, that portion of it. Currently we run, I'm currently on Teams. I'm actually looking at Teams right now and the ATR requests. I mean, we run, I don't know, it's not a lot, but I would say $30,000-$40,000 worth of Department of Defense freight right now already. And I run that. I mean, I'm doing that basically myself. I do that and basically send it to the team, and I get on there and I bid just here and there. Yes, we're having other people get trained on that and all that good stuff, because it's honestly it's just too much for me. But we're looking to grow as well. And one of the things that I was kind of very interested in is all the stuff that's on like Sam.gov. I'm on Sam.gov quite a bit, but I'm not learning the best ways to probably search for certain loads that I'm more interested in, or more freight. I mean, because I'm a very blunt person, but holy shit, there is so much stuff on there. I mean, you can even bid on just the transportation of from the airport to the bases. I mean, there's so many different things that you can bid on and that you can win. but I want to just basically be able to sort and just basically kind of get the RFP, or in the bid processes just for stuff that we're looking for. And that's that's why I'm having this conversation, I guess, or listening to the conversation.
Yeah, and is it Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, you said a mouthful. I'm glad you bring up Sam.gov. We provide a value add to the Sam.gov platform. You can Google my name, Nick Bernardo, with search terms, NAICS codes wrongly assigned to federal buying. And there's a pretty long article I wrote early this year. Up to 40% of the time when the federal government assigns a NAICS code to something on Sam.gov, they assign it incorrectly. And there's a significant percentage of other opportunities where they are only assigning one NAICS code because of how their system is set up, but many NAICS codes would apply based on the activity included in the scope of work. And I think that's what you're getting at, is it's very difficult to search on Sam.gov. So what we're doing is we're using a combination of artificial intelligence as well as looking at certain data points in the data that is publicly available and making inferences based on AI and other programming, so that there's a higher likelihood that we can put something in front of our users that is relevant. So I would encourage you to reach out to me on that offline, and I can show you what I mean by that. But I have a question for you guys that are for everyone who's on the panel right now. Do you all do, or really for Joe and David, do you do business with other companies like Clay's? And do you have reason to network with Clay to team or partner on federal opportunities?
Well, most of our federal opportunities, honestly, we're brokering out. I mean, we're running it through our brokerage, and we're basically, partnering up with other asset-based carriers to help us out. That's pretty much, the basis of what we've done so far with, the Department of Defense. It's pretty much everything is going through the brokerage, and then we're using, asset-based carriers to move our freight.
So Clay,
And we have a couple.
I don't know if
we
it's of
use.
interest to you, Clay, but perhaps you all, if you want to send me an email, I can put you in touch
Sure.
offline. So Clay, additional.
I wanted to say this
sorry.
real quick. We actually, it's kind of what I wanted to join this call for as well, is that we call ourselves a 3PL for 3PLs, working with other 3PLs like them, for example, that may have a contract with the government. They're working on a project with the government. They need help with that. They need additional storage, whatever that is, to help them win that business as well. So we do that as well. We're a 3PL for 3PLs.
So there may be networking opportunities here. Clay, additional questions? We do have another hour. We can certainly take another question or two now, and we can save some for the end if you'd like.
Yeah, make questions back up. What are some past experiences you guys have had, positive and negative, that other companies like mine may have run into?
Well, I think a common negative experience would be the larger the contracting opportunity, the longer the sales cycle will be.
Sure.
So, we're aware of companies that have spent over $1 million on proposal development for opportunities that are, many times larger than that in terms of revenue, and then have the thing canceled after 2 years of bidding processes and amendments and reissuances and things of that nature. So the larger the opportunity, the more fraught with peril it is in terms of the risk of time. So you might be looking at larger opportunities, and maybe David and Joe could speak to this, but the larger the opportunity, the more interest there is in your competitors with that opportunity, and the more risk there is that you could spend 500 hours on a bid process, and a year and a half later they cancel it or you don't win.
Sure.
And on the flip side, the smaller opportunities, you may feel that there's a very different dynamic where there might be just a few bidders, something state or local, and you may see that there's a shorter path to success with state and local opportunities compared to federal, although the federal marketplace, I think, is enormously larger, as Joe and David could attest to.
Sure.
We've done that. We started off little and basically stayed little. I want to make sure that I have we'll say a firm handle on what I'm doing before, I start jumping into something larger. I mean, I did get a storage bid that we won. I ended up having to use another location because we didn't have enough room in our facility. So it was a little larger than what I thought. We did okay with it. So, I mean, there's nothing bad. I mean, we did everything that we were supposed to do, but reaching out to, like you said, the networking with Clay would be good, just to kind of learn what space they have available and where they're located and all that good, information as well. Because what we're doing is we're trying to reach out and learn more about other, 3PLs that are out there that has larger storage space. Because we also can win. We're Native American owned, and it's funny you got that in the background there. But my company is Native American owned, so I mean we have a lot of we can win a lot of things that a lot of people probably like Clay might not be able to win because they have to use minority businesses, if you will, first. So we get some nice opportunities with being Native American owned.
Yeah, that's
So
where
Clay,
we can.
let me put a fine point on it. After hearing what Joe just said, you all should definitely be in touch.
Absolutely, we want to work with that MBE scenario there and try to help them win those bids faster.
Yeah, I mean, we also have other opportunities with basically anything, because we have our the Winnebago tribe here in Nebraska, and we can open up 8A businesses basically at any time, that we want. I don't know if you guys are familiar going that deep into the federal codes, but we can open up an 8A business at any point in time. We have that luxury, being that, all of our board members are, Native American as well. And, and our sole responsibility is to make the Winnebago tribe, self-sustaining. And we're doing that. I mean, we're adding 2 new casinos in Omaha and Lincoln. And these are not little casinos. One's going to have a big hotel with over 100 rooms, and then we're looking at dog track, race tracks, horse tracks to these casinos as well. We're going to make basically Nebraska is going to become a mecca for the the Midwest is the whole idea.
Yeah,
we've got a big front run with all that.
All of this just underscores how large the federal marketplace is. So, Clay, before I take any final questions, I'm just going to let Darlene and Corey know that I'm coming to you next. So Clay, any additional questions? And obviously we know you're still on a trial on our site. We can talk offline again, later this week, but any final questions?
I think that's really what questions I have at this point. Just really interested to learn more about what we can do to work directly with the government, but at the same time work with anybody that's wanting to work with the government and help them win those bids as well. So whatever we can do.
Well, fantastic. Does anyone who is on the panel, David, Joe, Clay, do you want to stay on and maybe participate with others who are now joining in? Or do you want me to drop you off the panel?
I'll stay on. Joe, you just going to stick around?
Yeah, might as well. I mean, let's see what we can learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got to drop in 30 minutes. I've got another call I got to get to, but
yeah, just whenever people need to drop off, just drop off. So Darlene, I'm going to bring you on. I promised to call on you first. I just didn't see you when we launched. Let's see if I can bring you on. And Corey. And Darlene, can you hear me? We just need, oh, there we go. Darlene?
I'm here.
Hey, Darlene.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Hi.
Good afternoon. We have a Thanksgiving theme to today's event. So we're looking for Thanksgiving anecdotes, memories, a Thanksgiving joke. I can give one unless you have one.
No, go right ahead.
Anything that you're thankful for. So how about it? You'll take a joke?
I'll take a joke.
Okay. Why did the turkey stand on stilts? Because nobody eats flamingos for Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay.
Okay, let's put the
Hold it.
dad joke book away.
Yeah, that's a dad joke.
All right. Well, I mean, let's just be clear. There's lots of different levels of jokes. This is definitely a dad group appropriate session. Let's put it that way. So
I'll say.
Darlene, I think you wanted to talk about the simplified acquisition procedures threshold. So tell us a little bit about your company. Where are you joining us from? What do you do? And then we'll get into that.
Yes, my company is Reputex Systems. That stands for Representative of Technologies. We're an IT-based system that mainly focuses on the physical access control arena. We represent a couple of manufacturers, and we basically put in access control systems, surveillance systems, and we kind of dabble in IDS. We've been in the federal market for quite a while. Well, I've been in the federal market for quite a while. We've been in the federal market for about 3 years. Our customers are all government, well, primarily government. We have a couple of commercial customers, but mainly in the DoD arena.
Okay. And so you must be fairly familiar with the bid process. Have you been with the company long enough? And can you remind me, is this your company?
I am one of the owners, yes.
Okay. So what percentage of your clientele did you obtain through the bid process versus through relationship building?
All through relationship building.
Okay. Okay. So, and what percentage of your clients would you say are federal versus state and local?
All federal.
Okay. All right. So I say this kind of tongue in cheek, Darlene, but I feel like you might be able to tell me more about the simplified acquisition procedures than I could tell you. So what questions do you have around it?
I would like to use the most of our focus has been on relationships because relationships truly do make the world go round. We have relationships with a lot of Maydays. We also do some cybersecurity. So our partners are either in the cybersecurity arena or in the construction arena, because in construction projects, there's normally access control. So we have projects via 8As on several bases. But we haven't been able to utilize the SAP process. I mean, I have some projects that I have purchase orders where they were under small purchasing acquisitions. But I would like to utilize that more because I know the threshold is either 250,000 or 750,000. That I'm not clear on, which is why I want to know more about simplified acquisitions.
Yeah. So the threshold is 250,000. And for anyone else who is interested in this, I'll just sort of back up. So the federal government has different thresholds that help determine the methodologies and regulations they must follow to purchase goods and services. So there's something called the micro purchase threshold. So basically anything that's going to cost under $10,000, assuming the price is reasonable, then a government purchasing officer, a contracting officer can buy that with a credit card, assuming there's an established need and the price is reasonable. Then the simplified acquisition procedures is anything under $250,000. Now, they're not supposed to artificially bundle things or unbundle things to create the opportunity to use those procedures, although I'm sure that happens. But basically, if it's a product or service that's needed and the cost is expected to be under $250,000, number one, you must be a small business if they're going to use that methodology. So, Darlene, are you a small business in your industry or are you in multiple?
Yes.
Industries?
No,
So
we're a small business.
you're a small business in one or more industries?
In one industry.
In one industry, but you're not a large business in other industries?
No.
Okay. So one of the benefits, and you may already know this, is that if they want to use the simplified acquisition procedures, then it must be set aside for small business. And then it may be set aside for 8A or, woman-owned business or that sort of thing. Although they don't have to do that. They can do that, discretionary based on the rule of two and other regulations around the different statuses. So there's also provisions in there that allow them to buy up to, I think, $7.5 million if the need relates to some bio-nuclear or some kind of attack. So I take it, do any of your products have any use case in disasters or in humanitarian efforts or things of that nature?
No.
Okay, so we would be generally looking at purchases below 250,000 for that. So do you feel that this is a case? And by the way, I will tell everyone here that my experience is typically above that threshold because, my background has to do with consulting around the RFP process when the simplified acquisition procedures cannot be used. But one thing I've learned about federal folks over the years, Darlene, I wonder if you've observed this. Do you feel that sometimes there's an opportunity to coach federal contracting people on what mechanisms for purchasing are even available to them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're a small business and you have different vehicles that are available to you, you definitely want to find out what's their vehicle of choice. I hear all the time, oh, you should get a GSA schedule. Well, a lot of people don't even use a GSA schedule. Most of my clients don't. I could, via some of my manufacturers, sell via their GSA schedules, but that's not what the customer wants. They want to buy it a different way. Sometimes it's service to disable. Sometimes they want to do service to disable in conjunction with A2A. But you should also always find out what's the vehicle of choice to make the acquisition process as simple as possible. And perhaps they have goals around that particular vehicle.
Do you sense that maybe they may not be friendly to the simplified acquisition procedures because it ties their hands in terms of using a small business?
I haven't run into that yet, but that could be the case on some large IT acquisitions.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder how much of your relationship building, if it were focused on the idea of, hey, here's how the simplified acquisition procedures can benefit you. Do you feel that they would consider that presumptuous, like you're trying to tell them their job? Or do you feel that, the people you're talking to would be welcome to hearing the benefits of that?
The people that I've talked to thus far, like I said, I think that relationships truly make the world go around. So I'm always looking for ways to introduce myself to other people. So I would say just based on the people that I've already come across, they're open to, other ideas of how we can make this happen.
Yeah, so the threshold is 250,000, and I know that was ultimately the thrust of your question. Follow-up questions.
Mentor protege programs. I'd like to know more about those. I've been involved with a couple in the past when I worked for other people. In one case, I saw the benefit. There were some slight benefits to that. The technology transfer was there, but they didn't actually gain any business in that relationship. The other one was more interesting because it turned out to be more research oriented. It started in one area and then it grew into something else. So that was very, very interesting. But I'd like to know more about mentor protege and how that can really benefit, or does it really benefit small business beyond the technology transfer piece of it?
Yeah, I mean,
Are small businesses actually getting work with a mentor, or what's really going on there?
yeah, so it's a great program, and there's a newer version of it, obviously, in the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years. So the Mentor Protege program, for those who are not aware, is a federal program that allows one business to mentor a small business. So the mentor business does not have to be a large business. They can also be a small business, but the protege must be a small business. And the federal government has this program in place through the SBA. The purpose of it from the SBA standpoint is not simply as a means for parties to get together and win contracts, but that's how the SBA looks at it. The way the private sector looks at it is exactly that purpose. They are getting involved in the mentor protege program because they see opportunities to team with one another to get to the front of the line in terms of in terms of acquisitions and the bid process. And here's how they do it. So basically, the mentor is allowed to joint venture with its protege. So you could be Boeing, you could be a massive corporation, Fortune 100 company, and you could be a mentor to a protege small business that is in the defense industry. And Boeing can form a joint venture with that party and compete as a small business in a small business set-aside procurement. So it has tremendous advantages to the protege because the protege gets to use the past performance of the mentor, and the mentor is able to disproportionately share in the work involved in the project. So it truly is a wonderful way of encouraging large companies and small companies to get together to work towards competing for federal contracts. Now, I have some direct experience with parties getting together for that purpose. And a lot of times it's hard to get them to understand. And Darlene, I wonder if you have seen this. It's hard to get them to understand that the SBA thinks that you should be doing things to facilitate the transfer of knowledge, even if you're not pursuing contracts. Have you seen that?
The ones I've been involved with, that's all that happened. There was no business that was actually done where the protege was working with the mentor on a project where they were actually gaining experience and actually, making money. The technology transfer piece was actually the whole focus because they were able to get ISO certified. They had some lean processes that were put in place. So the technology transfer piece was the main piece, whereas the small business was looking also for the business side of it. That never really happened.
Yeah, and my recollection is that there was different segments. You have to tell the SBA in your application, we're going to help with technology, we're going to help with operations, we're going to help with marketing, but you don't have to include all of those things in your application. That sounds like an opportunity that was like kind of good for the protege, but like from the mentor standpoint, are you aware of any reasons why mentors get involved in these if it's not to pursue contracts?
I would think not, but I've never worked for a large company in that
Yeah.
capacity. So I can't think of a reason why, if you could take advantage of joint venturing, why are you actually coming to the table as a mentor if that's not part of what you're looking to do?
Yeah, it always seems that that is the driving force behind why a larger company would get involved in a mentor protege, is to be able to get the benefits of being part of a small business joint venture, even if you're not a small business. So, Darlene, this is really great stuff, and I would like to talk to you in the future because I think you would be a great panelist for a future installment, as well as some of the folks that we've already spoken with. So I appreciate your participation.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and please stay with us. And Corey McCullough, I think you've joined us. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, we're just getting a little bit of an echo. Corey, do you hear that?
Okay, I switched to my computer versus phone. That's why the echo.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So,
Okay.
Corey, are you willing to share a Thanksgiving anecdote, memory, a joke, or anything that you're thankful for?
No, I don't participate in that, but I'm glad to have some time off here coming up soon, and if there is such thing as time off.
I know the feeling. So where are you joining us from, and what do you do?
I'm coming from the Valleys, Phoenix, Arizona. Well, I don't want to make anybody jealous, but it's still 80 degrees here.
Okay. And what's your company, and what do you sell to the government?
So my company is Industrial Clean Air Products. So we take care of dust collection. So that'd be woodworking, fumigation. We take care of explosion proofs for that type of deal. So a lot of safety equipment for from galvanizing poisoning to all types of different ways of collecting from the source. So wood shops, welding shops, things like that, and also like blast furnace filters, things like that. So we're pretty new in the government space. We're trying to get our legs underneath us and trying to do what we can to collect, because we're on Sam.gov as well. And I tell you what, it's not an easy beast.
No, it's not. It's not. And so I know you were interested in talking about national stock numbers, NSNs. I think you might have referred to them as NPNs. They're also known as NSNs.
Yep.
So tell us, how are you using SamGov to identify products using NSNs, or are you doing that?
Well, they are the RFQs show the NSNs and no other information about it. Well, these NSNs are, without the word better way, is protected. When these companies put together and have won these bids, they hide theirs. That way it's not an easy way of seeing what the specs are, because there's so many specs. I mean, fans, it could be different horsepower, it could be different tilts, it could be all types, it could be stainless steel versus there's so many different specs, and a lot of these aren't said on the RFQs. It's just national, 0004567857332, and you can search that number all day long, and it will say the RFQ, it will say that, but to get the specs or the or any kind of information on it is almost impossible. I wouldn't say impossible, because nothing's impossible, but they don't make it very easy.
So you're using SamGov to find opportunities to sell products, right?
Correct.
Okay. So are you familiar with your NAICS code or your product service code and how that is used on SAM?
That's how I search most of it, that way, is through that. I also do keyword searches, because sometimes, as you say, the codes do not match what they're trying to sell or trying to get. I do run into that a lot, because a lot of times a dust collector filter or a blast boost filter, they're asking for, some pleat filters for their air conditioning unit, and while we can do that, that's not in the same realm.
Okay. And so would you agree with this statement? SamGov would be even more useful if they included the NSN as something that you could search against.
Oh, absolutely. Yes and no, because the NSN, it'd be, I understand the reason. It's a standard platform, so they know exactly what they're getting. I mean, that's basically a number provided to a product, so they understand what they're getting. There is no description behind that number. So we want part number 602, let's say, and 602 is and there, a lot of times their descriptions for it are not what they actually are.
So do you believe that it would be useful for you to obtain a comprehensive list or database of those numbers?
It would be, as long as there's descriptions behind it, yes.
And you're saying there are not descriptions behind them.
Correct. Okay.
So yeah, and I'm not an expert on NSNs, but I am aware of how you'll see them from time to time in SamGov. But I'm not sure. So in other words, what is in a best case scenario, what could you get related to NSN? Like, what is it? If you were emperor of the US government and you could make them do certain things with NSNs, what would it be?
Just put the specs. It doesn't have to be a brand name. It doesn't have, just the specs of what they're looking for. Let's say, I need like fan speed and fan, like say for fan motors, I would need what kind of CFMs, what type of blade, and what kind of horsepower. That's all we need.
Sure. So I would say, I generally try to tell people to just sort of operate based on the way SamGov is, not the way we wish it was.
Sure.
And I would continue to focus on your NAICS codes and your product service codes and doing different combinations of searches with those. And I know it won't completely find everything you're looking for. Now, also, I will tell you that our website has a value add where we're putting in front of you things based on certain combinations. So I don't know if that's of interest, but we can certainly talk about that offline if it is.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the searching part isn't too bad. That, finding quite a bit of information on that part, because unlike the previous with Clay, David, and Darlene and stuff like that, they have a whole lot of options with transportation and things like that, and a whole lot of ours are pretty specific, because we only deal with a few different types of products. So searching them isn't real hard, and finding those opportunities, it's finding out what they're specifying.
Have you looked into GSA contracting yet?
So I've tried that. I every time I do that, it keeps sending me back to Sam.gov, and I keep going in around and around, and I'm in a loop that I feel like I'm on a merry-go-round that I'm about to be flown off.
Well, it's really crazy. We hear this from time to time. We're aware of companies out there that will advertise that they will get you registered on Sam.gov. And there are also companies, and I used to do some of this consulting, where they will get you on a GSA schedule and get you a GSA contract. And I'll hear people out there saying, well, you don't need anyone to get on Sam.gov. It's a scam. You don't need to pay anyone to do it. Well, there's a benefit to that if you're busy, because there are legitimate companies that will spend a lot of time just getting your SAM profile set up if you don't have time to do it. Sure. But it is a required step. So in other words, you cannot have a government contract unless you have a Sam.gov account. So I would encourage you to either make that investment and spend more time to get your SAM profile set up, or hire an outside company to just do it for you, because there have been all kinds of problems with that system, and people wait months and months to get their questions answered.
I think it's pretty much set up. I don't know what else I could add to it.
Okay, yeah. So do you have a complete SAM profile?
I do believe so. I don't see any missing information.
Yeah, okay. So if you have a SAM profile, and do you do business nationally?
I do it regionally right now, but I can do it nationally.
Okay, so for GSA contracts, they need to see that you have the ability to distribute products nationally. So I'm not sure if showing that you've placed or fulfilled orders in different states, that might be sufficient, but I can certainly make referrals if you are interested in getting on GSA schedule or having some conversations around that.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'm open for conversation and see what we need to do there, because a lot of time it's easier to get some experience and cut through that tape and get moving versus spinning your wheels and getting nowhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we move on, Corey, do you have any additional follow-up questions?
Not at the moment. I mean, I just kind of, like I said, trying to get our legs underneath us and going from there. I mean, I know there's similar companies that what we do that are easily doing 25, 30, $100 million in what we do in government contracts. Well, we know we're not going to do that year one or year two with the government, but we would like to definitely ramp up to that point.
Well, I will make sure that I follow up with you, Corey, after today's event, and we can talk about some of these things a little bit further. And Nathan, I'm going to tell you that we're going to come to you very, very shortly. I don't think there's any additional follow-up questions. We have some folks who may like to participate. So I know, Kelly, you're with us. I'm not sure if you'd like to participate. I'm going to bring you on momentarily. And I think what I'd like to do, and we also have Nick Kraft, and Nick, I'm going to bring you on as well. And by all means, if you've already participated and you want to drop off as a panelist, just let me know and I'll do that. Or you can stay on if you'd like to jump in. So Kelly, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Welcome to MyGovWatch Live. And can I ask you, do you have a Thanksgiving anecdote, memory? Would you like to hear a joke, or is there something you're thankful for?
So one memory that we started, my sister-in-law, who unfortunately passed from breast cancer about 6 years ago, she actually, because she knew she was, having the issues she was having and might not be here long, she started a, I just forgot the word, tradition with the family. She would buy a tree from Michael's that didn't have leaves, and then she would print out leaves, and we would all write something on the leaves that we were thankful for and hang them on the tree. And then the next year she would bring up, okay, what are we thankful for this year? And it was nice to see how some people had the same things they were thankful for yearly. and then how some of them changed. Usually it was the kids that had stuff that changed, especially as they grow. My oldest went from being thankful for his Xbox to being thankful for having a roof over his head. So we still do that even though she's gone, and it's a nice little tradition that we have, and something that I think everybody looks forward to at Thanksgiving.
Well, I think that's a beautiful sentiment, and boy, I love hearing that kind of thing, and my condolences. And so can you tell us where are you joining us from and what do you do?
I'm in Houston, Texas. I am actually, I wish that Austin could have been on this today because he does more of the bid stuff than I do. So he probably could have benefited for this more than I am, but I'm hoping that some of the notes that I'm taking and things that I'm learning can help him out. I'm actually the employee and community culture director for the business. It is Sign Express. They are a sign company that does all kinds of signs all over the United States, mostly in Texas, but they do have signs all over the United States. My husband actually owns the company. And between him and his business partner, they have almost 50 years of experience in the industry. And they've been around since 1998. Like I said, they've got signs, and they do everything from little banners to full-size LED billboards.
Well, that's a very interesting business, and we know the government buys a lot of signage, and we actually have a category on our website just for signage and wayfinding. They buy so much of this stuff all over the country that it's its own category on our website. So I know it was a little bit open-ended, and I know that this is really just educational, but are there specific questions or things that you're just wondering about government contracting?
I guess the biggest one on government contracting that they've kind of run into, and it's really split. So I don't understand why some have a thing against it and some of them don't. My husband has a couple of gentlemen who work for him that do have they have criminal past, unfortunately, because they were, as they put it, stupid and dumb when they were younger. And they've done some where they're okay with somebody with a felony or something on their record being there. And then like they've done some signs at military bases, which absolutely do not allow felons on. And there's paperwork and stuff they have to fill out, which I understand it in some aspects. And then in some aspects, I don't understand why some government facilities are okay with it and some of them aren't. And when I say they have records or felonies, I'm not talking about anything major. I'm talking about most of them were drug charges, stupid things. Like I said, they were kids and did dumb things.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea. And we've seen this in the bid process where there might be a certification where, you know, if you're bidding on a contract, they want to know upfront, you're certifying that no one who is a felon will work on your project or is employed by your company. And so we've seen that from time to time. So I'll just give you a couple of roads to go down or just ideas to think about. And there are certainly legal resources that we have available to us. There are GovCon attorneys that we work with if it ever comes up where you need, you know, sort of a legal question answered. But don't assume that the government folks that you're dealing with are aware of the appropriate law or regulations. And so there might be local buyers who may or may not be aware of a state law that either requires them asking you about this or that disallows them from asking this kind of thing. And we've seen some laws around that in the last 10 years or so. So I would not assume that the people that are asking you for information necessarily are correct about what they're asking you. That's number one. I would educate myself on what are the federal laws around this kind of thing, because you have a pecking order, right? The federal laws supersede state and local. And then I would look at the state laws in whatever state you're working in around that kind of thing. And then if you see no reasons why someone with a misdemeanor background or even a felony background can't work on something, then it becomes a question of, is there a local law? Because certainly municipalities and counties can create local regulations around that. Or is it simply a policy? So there may be a policy absent even a law at the local, state, or federal level. Now, I will not hold myself out as an expert on that particular type of law, but we do see that from time to time. So does that help?
Yes. And like I said, I understand to an extent, especially when they do stuff at schools, them wanting to know that kind of information. I just thought it was kind of interesting that sometimes they get government contracts and that's a very prominent and front running question that's asked. And then sometimes they get government contracts and it's not it's not even questioned. So I just didn't know if maybe there was a reason between the different facilities. Like I said, I understand it at a school. I kind of understand it on a military base. But then, like I said, there's other times that they get government contracts, like they did an office build, or not an office building, but like a courthouse building that was a federal thing, and there was no question to it with that. So I think maybe it depends on, like you were saying, if it's federal, state, local, cities, things like that.
I think it does. And I would also go back to the idea that they may not be aware of which regulation they're supposed to be following. So it would not surprise me if a local government agency puts something in a bid that says no felons, and there's a state law that says, hey, you can't exclude felons. So I would not be surprised if things like that happen in either direction. But it's an interesting idea for sure. I actually have a very good friend of mine who shall remain nameless, and they have the discretion to do this kind of thing, especially as it relates to defense or important infrastructure, national infrastructure. I had a government contractor visit my home last month because a good friend of mine was going for a job with a government contractor involving immigration, and they actually sat at my dining room table and asked me questions about this person, such as, what kind of person is this? Is this somebody you can trust? And so they can go to any level they want to qualify people to work on their contracts, but it doesn't mean that they're allowed to in the first place.
Understandable. And that's good to know. It's something that I will definitely bring up, because they are getting more and more into the government side of things. Because as you said, especially with the wayfinding signage, it's all over the place out there right now. So it's definitely something I will tell him to look at, because it mixes up things a little bit when it comes to who's going to do the installs. And there's been times he's had to go and do installs, not that he minds doing them. But then that takes away from him running the business and doing business development and things like that, because he's out in the field, taping signs to a wall. So it does sometimes cause a problem. Sometimes it doesn't. I just wondered if you knew why some of them did and some of them didn't, but that makes sense that maybe it is a fact of they don't know that they can or can't ask that.
Yes. And I think you're going to find that. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would also say, and this is just a shameless plug for the website, if you're not already using our site, it comes with a 14-day free trial. For anyone who attends a webinar like this, we immediately make it 30 days. So that takes us into December. We'd even put it to the end of the year. If you decide to sign up at any point, feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and so Nick Kraft, and Kelly, please stay with us if you'd like. If you hear something that's of interest, jump in again, and we still have some of the others on with us who will stay with us. So Nick, if you'd like to join us with your audio, is there an anecdote, a Thanksgiving memory? Would you like to hear a Thanksgiving joke or something you're thankful for?
I have an anecdote from many years ago where we left the turkey cooling on the counter, and our beagle managed to get up there and drag it down onto the floor. And by the time we caught him, he had a drumstick pulled off, and we decided to let him have that. And we declared an extended 5-second rule, and so the people who hadn't seen where the turkey had been, we sliced it in a way you couldn't really tell, and served it up.
That is, I'm not sure what other recourse you would have at that point. And although you didn't ask, I'm just going to offer this anyway. What do you get when you cross a turkey with a centipede?
Centipede.
Drumsticks for everyone.
Yes.
So Nick, what kind of questions did you have around government contracting and business development?
I'd like to change my question if you don't mind.
Yeah. And by the way, tell us where are you joining us from and what do you do?
I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I do web design. And I'm one person business who expands, with subcontractors for projects. And my probably maximum number of contracts I can handle would be 2 a year. I just finished my first proposal, and it took me a month to get it done. You were talking about how long it takes some companies to do those, but it was also the first one. And one of the things I'm curious about is, like, I was doing a state contract, and is it possible if you have things like native or veteran backgrounds to sort of register that nationally and have it apply to all states, or do each of the states have their own, is there a way to certify in one place one time and have it apply to everybody?
And is your question for the Native American program, or is it about some other program?
It's both native and veteran, which I am both.
Okay, and thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank
So
you.
for Native American, the federal government has a fairly robust program. There may be state programs, but I am not particularly aware of where those would be. If Arizona, it would not surprise me if Arizona had one. I'm simply not aware of it. But I can tell you that in general, qualifying for one program in one state will not qualify you automatically for all of them. Or
Okay.
qualifying federally would not qualify you in Arizona, even if there was an Arizona program. And for veteran, do you happen to have a service-connected disability?
No.
Okay, so the only benefit federally would be with the Veterans Administration. So any of their contracting initiatives, they have incentives to give dollars out to veteran businesses, but they're the only ones with that requirement. The rest have a disabled veteran business enterprise incentive, but not simply veteran, if that makes sense.
Okay. How about another one?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, Nathan, you're next.
This is another, I mean, obviously my thoughts are on sort of standardization to save time. But is there any standardization across various agencies for what's in the RFP and what is required to, or is that just each entity creates their own structure for how, like in this case they call it an RFQQ, which was qualifications and quotation.
That's actually one I haven't heard before. So many acronyms, but RFQQ sounds a little cray-cray to me.
Well, they basically, and they, a lot of these say, if you don't answer everything we ask, we're going to assume you're an idiot and you're bumped,
Right, and they're allowed to make as many mistakes as they'd like.
Yeah, including in this case calling it 3 different things within the document, But,
yeah, but no, unfortunately, you're not going to find a lot of standardization.
Okay.
But so what we encourage people to do in proposal development is, I know it, might have taken you several hours to put a document together, but take another half hour and identify content snippets. I mean, you're aware of CMSs for websites.
Mm-hmm.
Create a document that is a CMS for your future proposals.
Yeah, that seemed to emerge there. There's like I'm assuming folks, I think you've said that before, that you sort of have a template emerges after a while, and you can just start with that and add and subtract away from it. But
that's a strategic advantage. So a strategic advantage would be, if you want to respond to 12 proposal or RFPs per year, or RFQQs, how quickly can you develop one? Because 80% of it you're not writing, you're just copying and pasting. It's how do you get the 20% that's new? How do you maximize the time you're spending on the 20% that's new while not spending any time on the 80%, that has already been written?
Okay. Yeah, that's good stuff. Because I just lost what I was thinking of.
Well, and I'll just say this too, there are software programs out there, certainly if you're doing a low volume of RFPs, you really don't need them, but high volume companies that have 5 or 6 people in-house writing proposals, they use management software. It's basically CMS for proposals.
Yeah.
Nick,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, additional questions? And you can stay on with us too. We can bring Nathan on and he can start, talking a little bit about what he's working on. And as you think of things, you can just jump in.
Well, I kind of circle around to my my original question, which I mean is, I don't know how it can be answered unless you know every city, state, and entity in the country. But it's I found a state where their standard is to reveal their budget for the project in the RFP. And I've basically decided I will only bid on those because trying to guess an amount with some of, I mean, my the things that I'm bidding on are usually pretty complicated. So it's not just like we need this to go here and that's it. It's like all these different factors going into it. But so trying to guess, especially at the budget levels that they're working at, in order to compete, seems almost impossible to me. So
yeah, so there's two ways to think of this. One is the way you're thinking of it, which is knowing in advance what is the financial commitment they're making to their web infrastructure, right? And sometimes that will be in the RFP. It's not typical that it will. Oftentimes, if people ask in the RFP process in the Q&A, what is your budget for this work? They won't answer it the way that
right.
a lot of people in the private sector wouldn't answer it. But I would also encourage you to look for, if you're going to be working in different jurisdictions, look for maybe meeting minutes or council agenda, things that are published where they might mention that they're working on a web project. And I think you might find some budget information there. Like if there were particular cities or counties that you wanted to do business with, you could search their websites and look for meeting minutes where they might disclose that.
Okay, yeah, and that reminds me that I once worked for a university where basically everything they did was in the budget. You could see what everybody made and what all the projects were. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, and then on the back end of that, and I know this, you're not going to want to hear this, but there is the open records body of laws out there where after bids are submitted, you can use our website where we will go out and get pricing submitted by all the bidders. So here's another way you could use our site. You could have us complete the open records process for a number of bids, maybe in a certain region of the country or in your state. And if you have us do it a number of times, you'll start to see the same companies bidding and you'll figure out how they price bids. So at that point, it doesn't matter how the government agency budgets for it, because you have the information on what other people are going to propose. And I find that it's always good to be in the middle. So I don't know if that's a benefit, but that's something you can do through our site today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So stay with us. And now we're going to bring on Nathan Kaplan.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, Nathan, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Nathan, would you like to start with a Thanksgiving anecdote, memory? Would you like a joke? Do you have a joke or anything you're thankful for?
Yeah, I mean, nothing too special. I think growing up, I would always go to New York and my grandmother would cook turkey and I didn't know this at the time, but she always like horribly overcooked it. And so I just thought growing up the turkey was supposed to be like really, really dry.
Yeah.
And then like one day, like not on Thanksgiving, I randomly had turkey that was like not dry. And like I suddenly realized that all these years I had been having like really bad turkey. That was quite the realization.
And Nathan, by the way, do you have the ability to share your video? Because this is, and I don't need video, but I'm wondering if I screwed something up in the settings, because this is the first session in almost 2 years of doing this. Well, there we go. And maybe I'm glad to see that you're able to share video. I thought maybe it was just that I set up this session where no one could share video. It's the first session where no one shared video. And now here comes everyone. I don't need it. I was just curious if I screwed up the settings. Thank you, Corey. But so Nathan, where are you joining us from? And could you just tell the audience why you joined today and what is it you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, so I'm joining from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a doctoral student in economics at Harvard, and I'm interested in studying kind of questions related to the procurement process. And I think there's kinds of different things that have come into view in sort of getting to know the process. But I think one thing that's sort of coming up on the call and just in reading around a fair amount over the last couple of weeks and months is like, I think search costs in these markets are really high. And it seems like it's just really hard to find projects that are good fits for companies for reasons, particularly with the state and local aspect. I think reasons that have to do with decentralization of like the posting process. And so I've sort of gotten interested in trying to figure out ways of aggregating or centralizing information flow, like basically what MyGovWatch is doing. So I think my interest in coming on today was sort of related to what you were just talking about, which is trying to understand how I could get information on past bid proposals, pricing, behavior on both the buyer side and the supplier side in terms of like how these markets operate. I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, I'm also interested, like particularly within the banking sector. There's been some talk about the effects of regulation on municipal banking. So I've been trying to get into that through the RFP process. But I think in general, I've just become sort of interested in frictions in the procurement process, and using kind of trying to figure out how I could use MyGovWatch to study that market.
Absolutely. So I promised you some numbers, and I have some numbers for you, and we can certainly talk about these offline at another time. But I looked up in our database just for the last 12 rolling months, how many times was there an RFP that looked like it had to do with banking or depository? And this is not even comprehensive. This is just a few like very rudimentary searches in our system. So we saw about 277 RFPs that contain either banking services or depository services. And you mentioned Texas. So 30 or 29% of those were in Texas. So in 1 out of 50 states, it was 29% of the opportunities. And can you tell the audience why that is?
Yeah, so in Texas has a law in their municipal code saying that municipalities have to put out depository services for competitive bidding at least every 5 years, and it has to be publicly solicited. So like in other states, sort of municipalities have the wherewithal. They can sort of decide if they want to put out for competitive bidding or not, and with what kind of regularity, or if they want to just renew. But in Texas, any incorporated city or county has to put out public solicitations.
So as it relates to finding out about what is happening with these opportunities, anyone can complete an open records request. And you may know that. However, after being involved in open records requests for almost 16 years, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. And when I say that, what I mean is there are government agencies out there where all you have to do is send an email to the right person, and less than 30 days later, you're going to get an email with the documents you're looking for. Now, that is, that's the easiest scenario. I would say that happens maybe 1 in 10 times. The majority of the cases, maybe 8 out of 10, will be looking up on the website for, how do they even handle this? Maybe there's something on there, maybe there's not. Maybe you have to send an email. Maybe you have to complete an online form. Maybe you have to print a piece of paper and, then scan it and email it to someone. Maybe you have to follow up 3 times over 3 months. Maybe you have to call 6 times over 6 months. So it becomes a question of diligence at that point for probably 80% of them. And then for 10% of them, they're just going to stonewall you and do all kinds of things to circumvent the law. And that does happen maybe probably fewer than maybe 1 out of 20 times that happens. And there's all kinds of ways that they do that. There is nothing preventing you from doing it if you have the time and you have the diligence, and it's basically a spreadsheet at that point. People can use our site to do that. Certainly realizing it is something that is academic. There may be budget expenses that you would not be interested in incurring if you used our site. However, you could use our site to do that very thing.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks. I think the other kind of main question I had, which presumably would hopefully be helpful for at least some other people on the call, is like, how is kind of the coverage sourced for the RFPs that are listed on the site? Like, I know you mentioned kind of like AI and some sort of like scraping, but is there partnerships with certain bodies or of municipalities, or is it just based on which municipalities tend to post things that are easily scrapable?
Yes. And when I say yes, I say that jokingly because it's yes to everything you just said. It's a complex universe of human behavior. And when I say that, what I mean is it runs the gamut of the federal government having Sam.gov for most significant opportunities. Then you'll have state governments that have their own portals that work very well. Then you'll have other states that have portals that don't work very well. Then you'll have states that have 4 different portals for 4 different reasons. And then you have all of the same things that I've just described at every significant municipality. So it becomes a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole on knowing who is buying, how often are they buying, are they only buying publicly on their own website, are they only doing it through a state portal, or are they doing a combination of that? So it is an extremely complicated quilt that we've put together over the course of the last 7 years. Anyone can do it with 7 years' time, let's put it that way.
And just out of curiosity, have you noticed any patterns in terms of bodies that have systems that are designed more poorly tend to have less competitive bidding and less participation? Like, put another way, like if I'm a supplier, would I get extra juice out of bidding on contracts with bodies that have really poorly designed interfaces so that it's kind of like a barrier to entry for other suppliers?
Yeah. I mean, these are really good questions. So think of it this way. There's a stratification, if you will, of where people live in the United States. And there is a disproportionate number of small municipalities, a huge number of small municipalities with a relatively small number of people living in them. So the well-run small municipalities will use their state portal. And if they don't use their state portal, they will use a third party that will help give them an interface to do that. We can capture that information regardless of where it ultimately lives because it's all public. Certainly there's an opportunity for companies that, or for smaller municipalities, they would certainly be getting fewer bids because they're not doing as good a job as other municipalities in getting the word out that they're buying something. So certainly there is a gap in the marketplace there.
And then I guess the one other main thing I would have would be, do you think it kind of makes more sense if you have a well-defined universe of potential buyers or bodies who are going to submit RFPs on things that you'd be interested in? Does it make more sense to track the buyers and see when someone in your set of buyers you're watching puts out for an RFP that's a match? Or do you think more looking globally and just looking contract by contract, and then whoever the buyer is,
We focus on the concept of what's being purchased. And so the way that we describe our website is that it's a supermarket with 204 aisles in it. And so we have 204 industries that we track on the site. And the focus is on conceptually what is being purchased. So we have 24 top level industries, construction being one of them, professional services being another. And then within each of those, we have a number of what we call subcategories. And so conceptually, if someone is buying architecture services, then you should want to hear about that regardless of who is doing the buying, because there are ways to filter then within our site and within competing sites where if you really only want to hear about architectural opportunities from school districts, you can do that. But it's better to cast a wide net because the way I explain it to people is that someone may be buying what you sell and you don't expect it to be happening from that source. For example, the state government, maybe they're creating a pool of architects who can work for school districts. So that's a state purchase. And if you only select school districts on our site, you wouldn't hear about that.
Got it. Thanks. That's super helpful. Yeah, I don't want to displace anyone else's questions, especially.
No. Well, Nathan, let me just tell you, anyone who wants to chime in, who's already on the panel, can just unmute and chime in. Anyone who would like to raise their hand can do that, but the rest of the time of this session is yours.
I guess the other thing I was curious about is the historical archiving on the site. And if you're interested in looking at past RFPs that have since closed, how far back would that go? And what's the kind of process of obtaining those records through MyGovWatch?
Yeah, so good question. So we've been aggregating this data for about 7 years. However, we have found that it's not really useful to our users to give people 7 years of access to any architectural service purchase in the last 7 years. So we have just set limits around that. And this is, you can look this up right on the homepage of the site when you're comparing editions. But if you have a paid edition, you can look back 1 year. And we hardly ever get a request to look at data beyond that. So the average business person, they're looking ahead, right? And very few of them, or not as many of them as you would think, value the historical information. Someone who has a use case like yourself, however, it's a completely different thing.
I guess one question I would have in general is why there isn't more interest from the business side in looking at, like, because I think the issues already sort of come up on the call, like pricing and margins and trying to figure out size of contracts if you're not in a regime where they have to post parameters on the public RFP. I guess I would be curious why that isn't more of a point of demand from the business side on the site.
Yeah, great question. And we struggle with this question as well from time to time. So think of it, maybe a few different kinds of businesses. There are, let's just say business type A. That's a small to mid-sized business. And maybe they have someone like Clay, who on the call earlier, does a little bit of sales and who also, responds to bids once in a while, but they don't have people who can just sit there and be analysts, right? Then you have, going up the food chain, you have much larger companies where there are analysts involved in the business development process. And certainly they are doing those kinds of things. But the largest cohort of businesses that should be using our data or data like ours are companies that just could never justify having a person, even part-time, doing the type of analysis that you were talking about. So they're looking forward and they're saying, where are the opportunities today? Where are the opportunities over the next 12 months? And what data tools do I need to have a chance at winning some of that? It's a little bit more opportunistic than maybe it could be.
Got it. And the other thing, you mentioned a bit about this 80-20 idea, that 80% of the average proposal response is going to be kind of previously written and 20% is sort of customized to the contract itself. I guess, could you talk a little bit more? Is the 20% basically like pricing and your value add or differentiator pitch, or is there other kinds of parameters of contracts that tend to vary a lot?
So it tends to vary, but if you're selling a product, then the content becomes less important. So if you're buying a certain kind of, you're buying 50 ceiling fans, that becomes a request for quote where they're saying, we need 50 ceiling fans. These are the specs associated with those ceiling fans. Give us a price. And by the way, tell us where they're being made. However, if you're selling a solution where it's service oriented or it's a combination of product and service, now you're getting into the realm of a request for proposal, which has to do with telling the buyer how you're going to solve their problem rather than just meeting a spec. And in that case, that's where this 80-20 comes up, where 80% of the content is content that you probably wrote before, but 20% of it would be answering questions that are unique to that opportunity, pricing being one of them. But we've seen, lots of other things people ask where it might be a one-off question and you don't really have a good answer for it that you've written before.
Got it. Thank you. This is super helpful. I see someone else's hand is up, so I'll.
Yeah, let's ask. So Nick, I don't know if that's intentional. You are not muted. So if you,
I just didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
There were some great topics in there. So thanks, Nathan. That actually benefited me and stuff I forgot to ask about. One thing I've noticed in my short time of looking at RFPs is some of them are extremely, like, the response time is so short you almost couldn't respond because they have a 40-page RFP and they have 1 week for you to respond. I mean, do you know what's happening there? Is that sometimes a mistake and sometimes something else?
So we typically see 2 to 4 weeks being the sweet spot, but certainly there will be outlier cases where they're only giving you a week to respond. Are you saying you're seeing that a lot?
I've seen it a few times, and perhaps some of the times it's 2 weeks, but I don't see how you could do it in 2 weeks unless this was your only thing to do in those 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that gets back to this idea that companies of a certain size will have a full-time person who's only responding to bids or who might be 100% focused on marketing communications. And that's actually how I got into this business, is doing that kind of work, 25 years ago. But yeah, so there is a constraint there. Now, I will say this, it's counterintuitive, but the shorter the time frame, the more likely lots of companies will say, you know what, we don't have time for this. And you might see 10 bids go down to 4 or 3, only because 3 people had their act together enough to get a bid out. Another thing is January through June tends to be a much busier time for bids, although there's a lot going on throughout the year. It's certainly busier in the first half of the year. So when there's a lot of different things to bid on, that's a good time to pick things out and bid on them, because even the big boys in different industries can't get to everything.
Okay. I know in the old days, there was a presumption of like a conspiracy or something, that they already knew who they wanted, but they were required to do a public bid. So they just put it out there very short time or something, but it seems like it's harder to get away with that now.
Well,
If I could jump in, that it's not that hard to get away with. I would say a lot of times when I see something that the turnaround time is that quick, they know who they want to use and they already have a relationship with that company, but they still have to put it out for bid. So that's why relationships become so key in your business development. The more people you know, the more people that can get to know what you do and what value you can bring to the table, the better for you. Even in responding to RFPs, people tend to do business with people they know. So it kind of behooves you to get to know as many people on the procurement side and the program management side as you can.
From your lips to God's ears, as we used to say, Darlene, and I certainly do agree with everything Darlene just said. But I would just also add that we see bids all the time where, for whatever reason, they didn't get a single bid for a product or service that is advertised as being out for bid. So I always like to say there are no hard and fast rules in government contracting. Certainly, if you can develop relationships, yes, do that. By all means, do that. But occasionally we see people win blind bids, and that's across industry. So I wouldn't discount that completely.
Well, thank you.
And so I would say we're just a little bit more than an hour and a half. Nathan, certainly if you had more questions, I have another 27 minutes before the next thing I have to do. So could you just give me an indication, Nathan, one way or the other, whether you might have anything else for us now?
I think I was able to run through everything. I actually have something I got to hop to in about 5 minutes anyway. But you got to everything that I wanted to ask about.
Yeah, okay, well then thank you. And so folks, I think a question from David Buckley. David, I don't know if you created an account on our site yet, but I'll send you an email. And do you have an account on our site yet, David?
No, I didn't think the free trial started until after we had done this webinar. So
yes, so if you
not been on it yet.
Well, I'll just tell you, if you go to MyGovWatch.com, create an account, it'll ask you to put in a credit card. It's a 14-day free trial, but what I will do when I see it come across is I will extend that to 30 days.
Okay.
So, and I can even put it to the end of December. if that would be useful to you, so that you have, 6 weeks at that point just to play around with the site and see how it works.
Okay, well, just stick around and when everybody else drops off, I do have another question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So if there's nothing else and I don't see any other hands raised, Kelly, anyone?
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you know if government contracts do any kind of value engineering with their stuff? Like we've done stuff with GCs where they've possibly the projects that's being built, not government related, but like we just did one for UT here, University of Texas here. That went out to bid. They had spec'd somebody else. They took alternatives. They gave it to the GC. The GC decided they didn't want to use who was spec'd, and they put out a value engineer reference. Do you know if government contracts do that? And you know what VE is, right?
Well, I would like to pretend that I do, and maybe they use a different set of terminology in the government space.
So
But for everyone's benefit, tell us what you mean by it.
So like, I'll use this one since this is the one that we just did. They had a budget of, I think it was 180,000 for the signs that were done. And the lowest bid came in at 178. And so this was my husband was subcontracting to the GC that was they're putting a new athletic facility at UT. And so this was the signage for that facility. And so the lowest GC came in at 178, but then they found out that there was going to be some other things that were going to make that contract go up. So they went back to the subcontractors that had been picked and said, hey, we understand that you gave us a bid for, 90,000 for the signage, but now we have this drainage issue that's going to cost an additional 30 and the school doesn't have it. Where can you trimline your your bid so that we can still use you, but not pay 90,000. So we have that additional 30 grand we need for the drainage.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can happen between bid submission and contract signing. And so some of what you're talking about could happen in there. Some of it could result in a bid being canceled and a new bid being issued. But government agencies just have to be a lot more careful. It's a little different than the private sector in that, unless something egregious or illegal happens in the private sector, they can pick whoever they want and they can do anything they want. In the public sector, if they don't do things in a certain way, they stand to have a bid protest pop up. So I suspect that there's some flexibility to do that once they've already picked someone and have awarded the contract, even if they haven't signed the contract yet. Or they would be more likely to cancel the bid and just redo it. Now, if anyone else has experience with this, please chime in.
I don't have experience with it, but I have a thought that you might want to take into consideration. A lot of the MILCON, military construction projects, are done via the Army Corps of Engineers. I would reach out to the small business person there to see if the services you just described are something they actually purchase and how to go about getting into that pool of companies that provide that type of service.
Thank you for that thought, Darlene. I appreciate it. I do have to drop off. I have to take my daughter to, she's taking her SAT test. So yay. So I do have to drop off for that, but I appreciate the time and for you having me.
Well, fantastic. And thank you for joining Kelly and Darlene and David and Corey and everyone. So I'll just, last call for any additional questions and then we'll wrap it up. And by the way, David, I can end the session and then we can, I'll turn the recording off and we can just go from there. So that being said, so folks, that'll do it for today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. And remember, if you're not already a subscriber, start your free 14-day trial of MyGovWatch today. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And thanks, folks.